We're going to begin with item number 25 under our CAO. And this is a public hearing regarding the impasse in negotiations over a successor memorandum of understanding, MOU, between the County of Kern and the Kern County Firefighters Union, IAAF Local 1301, and proposed resolution implementing last, best, and final offer and changing wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment for employees in bargaining units 7 and F, F like Frank, effective July 18, 2020. I understand Mr. Alsop and Mr. Brown will handle this matter. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. I can speak at length about this particular item and everything that's going on with the budget and the various challenges that we have. I'm not going to try not to do that today because we've got such a long day. This has been this particular agenda item and the subsequent agenda items that you'll be taking up, whether fire-related or budget-related. These are all issues that we have spent literally thousands of hours discussing during my time here in the 3.5 years that I've been here. Just thousands of hours, lots of work that's gone in. There have been lots of things written and reported and presented. But a few comments, not only related to this item, but the subsequent items that you'll be considering this morning. The anemic, we've got some considerable business challenges here in this county. Anemic growth in revenue sources, primarily property tax revenue, is a continuing and foundational economic challenge for Kern County. Revenue growth is not sufficiently keeping pace with year-over-year growth in the costs of providing essential county services, nor with the demand by members of our public for additional investment in our communities. There has been essentially no growth in property tax, the principal discretionary revenue source of California counties, or sales tax for the last 5 years. While the costs associated with labor, equipment, material, and utilities, among other things, has significantly increased. In January of this year, we made a presentation to your board as we began the budgeting process. We were joined in that conversation by our assessor, who was providing his projections on oil at that time. During that time, the assessor noted the property tax revenue growth over the last 5 years in counties of comparison. These counties of comparison are typically used to provide comparisons to salary adjustments and other items related to bargaining with our various employee groups. In Fresno County, they had 27% growth over the past 5 years. In LA County, they had 29% growth over 5 years, 33% in Sacramento, 33%, 34% in San Joaquin County, 34% in San Luis Obispo County, 25% in Tulare County, 23% in Ventura County, and 0.3% in Kern County. We are dead last in property tax revenue growth of all 58 counties. That is a significant foundational economic challenge for our county. So this challenge has been made significantly worse due to the sudden and dramatic economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, along with the recent and steep drop in the price of oil and the prospect of both of these compounding challenges persisting for some period of time. Our preliminary recommended budget comprises several revenue sources impacted by decreased consumer spending, including sales tax, collected in the unincorporated areas, Prop 172, public safety sales tax, realignment sales tax. There are a variety of these things. The preliminary recommended budget that you'll be taking up later on anticipates a total reduction in revenue due to these things, due to drops in these areas of $56.5 million in these revenue sources. Just 56 and a half in those revenue sources alone due to COVID-19. Does not include oil. Ultimately, the totality of this virus's impacts on our county budget will depend on the severity and duration of the pandemic, obviously, and any further actions or directives taken by the state and federal governments in managing through the pandemic. So our immediate and collective attention to the development of our 2020-21 budget and how we prepare today to address potential and significant discretionary revenue reductions that we're projecting is as far out as fiscal year 21-22 is absolutely critical. In fact, we're projecting a much more severe economic problem in FY 21-22. Yes, due to COVID, it's really unforeseen where we'll be. Matt just told you that COVID's going to be in our community well into next summer, likely well into next fall, and we'll be dealing with this. But what will happen in January, right now, is that we're projecting that our assessor, working with him, will come before your board and tell you that we are anticipating a 40% drop in the value of our oil properties in this county in January. That will provide a significant, it'll be a significant catalyst for budget problems, again, in that particular fiscal year. So we need to consider everything we're doing today and at the end, the preliminary recommended budget in the context of not just next fiscal year, but the fiscal year following. There are several short-term actions that your board directed us to take on the 19th of May. We've done a hiring freeze. Most counties and cities are doing that or have done that. Obviously, there are exceptions in limited areas, obviously first responders, filling deputy positions. If the chief, our fire chief needs a firefighter position filled, those things are exceptions to this rule. But this is our practice. Freeze on all flexible promotions through 2021, freeze on all special step increments through 2021, June of 2021, suspending non-essential capital outlays and other non-essential purchases for the remainder of this fiscal year, and likely practicing that going into next fiscal year. And there are some longer-term considerations that we presented to your board that require us to work with our various labor partners to discuss and consider. In fact, your board this afternoon will be taking up an item off consent dealing with early retirement incentives. That will be presented by Mr. Brown this afternoon. This is one of the long-term considerations that are underway. Our preliminary recommended budget to you this afternoon will is asking departments and taking into account a 7.5% reduction in net general fund contribution across the county. That is the most significant reduction to county departments and reduction in net general fund contribution since I've been here, even during our declared fiscal emergency that we declared over just a short time ago. So 7.5 is considerable. Keep in mind that we have defunded virtually all of our general fund departments by $34 million over the past 3 years. So asking them to take an additional 7.5% cut is an extraordinary ask, and it is not without consequence. And so we are trying our best to get these things done under difficult circumstances to maintain as many services as we possibly can, obviously with a priority still remaining on public safety areas, and that's how we're going forward. Final budget for 2021 will consider all the changes to current revenue projections due to COVID-19, which are rapidly changing. They'll be based on economic forecasts and conditions which will be changing, and the budgetary actions of the state and federal government. We hope that our projections are wrong. We hope that we are better off than we're projecting, obviously. We don't want to be in this position, but we find ourselves in this position. and it's not an easy position to be in. Lastly, and just finally, on the fire fund and some of the items that you'll be considering today, you know, our growth, the same principle applies to our fire fund and our fire department. Growth in our county revenue sources are not sufficiently keeping pace with the year-over-year growth in the costs of providing fire services, particularly the need to purchase and maintain PPE, personal protective equipment, which is a year-round thing, no matter COVID or not, with fire. These are a variety of things that they both wear and utilize in the course of their duties, and other essential equipment and apparatus that is needed to ensure, trucks and other things needed to ensure the efficacy of our fire services and the safety of our firefighters and the communities that they serve. The chief has absolutely no ability right now to make any investments in those areas because we're spending all of our time balancing the fire department out and just getting them even. We cannot get them into a position where they're getting ahead, where we're able to make these purchases that need to be made. You know, our problem there continues to rely on big contributions out of the general fund, and really departments that many of whom exclusively rely on the general fund for their own budgets. So a series of actions need to be taken today, now, in our opinion, to bring fiscal sustainability to the fire fund, to ensure essential year-to-year capital investment in equipment and supplies, which is our fire chief's #1 priority. It is a major problem that he is having, and we'd like to get us on course to fix that and for once and for all address their deficit and get this thing done. So the following actions will set a course for largely eliminating the current deficit in the fire fund over the next 5 years. They are as follows. We are recommending that your board immediately provide an additional property tax base revenue shift from the general fund to the fire fund of $4 million a year. That would be given to the fire fund. They don't currently have this revenue. We would shift it over in perpetuity and provide that revenue. They can count on that every year going forward. So an additional $4 million in funding to the fire fund from the general fund permanently. We would immediately implement, apply, and phase in a new and more accurate cost recovery methodology for all contract cities to begin paying the cost of fire services that are rendered in incorporated cities. This action, when fully implemented, provides additional revenue to the fire fund of approximately $10 million annually. This was a key recommendation of your board's commissioned audit of fire operations by the Center for Public Safety Management. We will be also undertaking immediate consideration, working with our fire chief and his staff on financing options for capital expenditures that need to take place in the fire fund, and make that funding and putting some financing plans in place to be included in this budget, to be included when we come back to your board in August for your board's consideration to begin allowing the fire department and the chief to begin moving ahead with equipment purchases. This action could result in the chief being allowed in this budget to purchase 9 brand new Type 1 fire engines. It would allow him to purchase 5 additional brand new Type 3 engines. It would allow him to purchase 10 brand new battalion chief vehicles. It would allow him to purchase 1 new bulldozer and trailer transport and tender. These are things that need to be done. This is equipment that needs to be replaced, and we want to help the fire chief move ahead. So in addition to the $4 million in revenue shift, in addition to getting our city contract squared away for an additional $10.3 million in revenue to the fire fund, we will be working to provide the chief with the money in this budget to move forward and purchase this equipment for his men. There is a item that we'll be taking up in just a second, dealing with FLSA. This is an item that we have been talking about for years, and it is one of the key recommendations of the commissioned fire study by the Center for Public Safety Management. This is the elimination of FLSA. This is the elimination of overtime that is paid out over and above what is required of us under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The reason why we're paying this out over and above is because back many moons ago, with a different board and a different staff and really different leadership in the fire department, there were commitments made to do this. And those commitments are not sustainable. They are not sustainable today, given everything that I laid out in our foundational economic problems and all the other problems that we're having. And they need to be addressed. This was not our idea originally. This was the idea and recommendation of our independently elected auditor controller. And then subsequently, it was the idea of the independently commissioned Center for Public Safety Management in getting it done. That group and that audit was done by current and former fire chiefs. Again, it's a key recommendation. This would eliminate and allow us to save approximately $3.4 million in our fire fund. That savings is critical to getting the fire fund shifted downward in expenses and upward in terms of revenue. This action is also critical to our financing plan that we're working on to provide our fire chief with all the equipment that I just listed. We would like to redirect the savings and this revenue into the chief's primary business problem, which is the purchase of new equipment. And we want to make sure that that effort gets sustained. Eliminating this particular item also goes a long way with assisting us in getting that done. If we're not able to get that done today, it makes getting those equipment purchases and getting some finance options in place much more difficult. Lastly, I want to say that the chief has worked on has provided some consideration to us. Not that we had asked for it, but he had provided it for some select limited station closures for an indefinite period of time. Now, the fire chief doesn't want to do that, and I don't want to do that, and I know that you don't want to do that. However, given the situation that we're in, it's prudent that we consider doing that, and I think that the scope of that particular action, if we do that down the road, would depend on our economic forecasts, our current fiscal position, our cost recovery, the progress that we're making with our contract cities, among a slew of other things that would be considered in the context of what that plan may look like. But it is something that we should talk about, given the situation that we're in. And with that, I appreciate your time and attention today, and I am going to kick it over for Mr. Brown, our Chief Human Resources Officer, to walk you through item 25.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Devin Brown, your Chief Human Resources Officer. The item before you is our request for your board to implement Kern County's last, best, and final offer to the Kern County Firefighters Union and change wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment for those employees represented by that union in bargaining units 7 and F. Those changes, as proposed, would become effective July 18th, 2020. It's taken, as Mr. Alsop mentioned, a long time for us to get here. In my 6 years as your chief labor negotiator, this is the first time that I've ever brought an item to impose terms and conditions on an employee bargaining unit. I'm more likely to bring you agreements between the county and those bargaining groups. But unfortunately, in this case, we have not been able to reach an agreement despite both sides valiant efforts to try to reach an agreement over the course of the last several years. Before I begin talking about what the action is today, I think it's important for your board, the public, and those interested parties to understand where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. That will give you the context that I believe is necessary to make an appropriate decision as you consider this item today. As Mr. Alsop mentioned, we've been dealing with extraordinary financial difficulties for a number of years. All of our county departments have done a valiant effort to cut budgets, make ends meet, and try to avoid massive cuts to our employees over the same period of time. But the problems and challenges just begin getting greater and greater, as Mr. Alsop mentioned, in preparation for the fiscal year 2021 budget and our future fiscal year 21-22 budget a year from now. So it's unfortunate that we have to consider items like these before you today. Back in January of 2017, in the midst of our first financial emergency, our Auditor Controller, County Clerk Mary Bedard, presented to your board an item that identified several issues, not just related to the fire department and the fire union, where the county could begin to recover some costs and make changes that affected their employees. The main items in that report was a recommendation by our Auditor, Controller, County Clerk to change the way we compensate overtime to bring it in line with the Fair Labor Standards Act requirements. Your board in this county for several years, as Mr. Alsop has mentioned, well beyond our tenures here in the county, have compensated vacation, sick leave, compensatory time off, and other paid leaves at time and a half when employees otherwise work extra hours during their regular work periods. The law only requires us to pay those vacation, paid sick leave, and other comp time paid leave benefits at straight time. Your board gave us direction to begin discussing that particular change with all of our bargaining units, and so we did. Over the course of a couple of years, we've approached our largest bargaining unit, SEIU, to make those changes. Representing nearly 5,000 employees in this county, the vast majority of our workforce, they reached agreement along those lines to make those changes in December of 2017. We've also approached our law enforcement and detention officer bargaining units with this particular change as well. But because of the dire retention issues in both of those areas of our workforce, we felt it wasn't appropriate at that particular time to make that change. We're talking about retention issues and turnover nearing 20% annually in both the detention officers and KLEA ranks. We began pursuing this change also with our fire union as the Auditor Controller County Clerk recommended before the contract with that union expired in September 30th of 2017. Mr. Alsop, myself, and then Fire Chief Brian Marshall met with the union to try to broach this subject and see if we could recover some costs due to the fire fund's continuous deficit that's been in place since about 2014-15 fiscal year. We approached those negotiations mid-contract, and they were not required to sit down with us, but we did reach agreement to sit down and talk. We talked earnestly about the need for doing this and some of the other needs that the fire union had at the time. We were unable to reach an agreement, but because we couldn't do anything mid-contract, we kept the existing status quo until the contract expired in September of 2017. But in that time, we commissioned an independent group, CPSM, to conduct a study about the fire department as a whole. not just related to this issue, but other issues where the fire department is doing great or could seek improvement. And as your board knows, the study was pretty voluminous and lengthy and made several recommendations, including the recommendations that our auditor, controller, county clerk had made several months earlier. That report was made public January of 2018, and we began negotiating after the expired contract with our fire union in June of 2018, June 11th to be exact. We met several times over the course of the next year to try to reach agreement on a variety of issues. From the very outset, we were frank and honest with the fire union negotiators that the county was seeking a contract that presented a net savings to the county. The reason why we sought that result was because of the fire fund deficit that's been escalating for several years and has been backfilled by general fund reserves over the course of the last 4 years. We met and discussed this particular issue, understood their concerns, understood the impact that it has to their members. And to be clear, we do not want to take money away from our employees at all costs. That wasn't our goal when we entered these negotiations. But nevertheless, there is very limited outlets for how we can approach reducing that deficit and beginning to balance that fire fund going forward. We met, as I said, several times, but we were unable to reach agreement. In April of 2019, we issued our last best and final offer, and as noted in my staff report today, that last best and final offer included 4 major changes to the fire fund or fire union employees, establishing an 18-day work period under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and I'll explain later what that means. Redefining hours worked to exclude non-productive paid time, leave time, such as vacation and sick leave, as I mentioned, ensuring that those are paid at straight time and not time and a half. Removing the administrative assignment designation in the salary schedule, but continuing with a 5% administrative assignment pay as a special pay. And the reason why we were proposing that was to ensure that all employees are paid overtime at the consistent rate of a 56-hour employee working in fire suppression out in the field. And ending the 30-year longevity pay, which is a 2% longevity pay when employees reach 30 years of service. The fire union voted on our last best and final offer, rejected it, and we brought on May 21st an item to your board, May 21st, 2019, an item to your board to officially declare an impasse in the negotiations. During that period of time, or during that meeting, the union pressed upon your board to consider removing things such as the longevity pay and continuing with the mediation and trying to resolve the impasse. Your board submitted the matter to mediation during that summer of 2019. We met with the fire union and a mediator from the state to try to resolve the impasse. We met at least 2 days during that summer, and as I said from the beginning, both parties tried mightily to come up with an agreement that terms that both parties could be happy with at the end of the day. We were unable to reach a mediated settlement, and as state law allows, the fire union requested that the matter be submitted to an arbitrator, a fact finder in what's called fact-finding process under California labor laws. That fact-finding hearing was conducted in the early fall of 2019, and the neutral arbitrator, Mr. Weinberg, myself, and the union representative, Mr. McCandlish, listened to testimony over the course of a day to hear the arguments from both sides about the various reasons why they believe, in some of their proposals needed to be as part of the package agreement. As is required under the labor laws, the neutral panel member concluded the proceedings by preparing a report, a fact finder's findings and recommendations. That report is included in the packet today as an attachment to my staff report. The fact finder found that the county should be able to adopt its overtime changes, that the union should be in receipt of a 3% COLA January 1st, 2020, and another 3% COLA, that's a cost of living adjustment, January 1st, 2021. And he found that there was a need to provide a 5% special pay as proposed by the union for EMT certifications because of the need for the county to have EMTs. He agreed with the county's proposed term, which would expire June 30th of 2021, and he agreed with removing the administrative assignment designation in the salary schedule and continuing with the 5% administrative assignment pay. The union, after receipt of Mr. Weinberg's recommendations, concurred with his report, but the county did not concur with his report. We concurred and dissented to a couple of the items, and I'll explain why. The main items that we dissented to were the recommendations for wage increases. That would be the 3% cost of living adjustment in 2 consecutive years, and the 5% special pay for EMT certification, which totals about 11% over a 2-year period, a cost of $8.5 million to the county and the fire fund. As I noted, we began these negotiations with an objective in mind to achieve savings for the county and the fire fund. Accepting those 2 recommendations would more than offset the savings that we were anticipating from the FLSA and overtime changes proposed by the county. The net increase would have been $5.1 million of ongoing costs to the fire department and the fire fund, which was already severely in deficit and being backfilled with general fund reserves over the course of 4 years. So we dissented to the agreement. We don't dissent to the idea that our employees are underpaid. Our firefighters are underpaid when you consider our comparable counties. Our employees in the county are underpaid to a T. Almost all of our employees, when you consider our comparable counties, are underpaid. And the firefighters are no different. And where we've can, as your board knows, we've tried to increase those salaries over the course of the last 2 years when they're not impacted by the general fund and when the retention issues are so severe, such as our law enforcement, that we have to take a stand and do something to stem that those turnover issues. But in this particular case, we did not find that an increase to the fire department budget of $5.1 million would meet our objectives and was not necessary because of the turnover numbers that are in the fire department as a whole. So we followed the fact-finding process. We made public the fact finder's report on October 11th, 2019, but we weren't satisfied necessarily with a result of bringing the item that we have before you today then. We, at our own initiation, requested a second mediation round with our fire union in October of 2019. October 25th, we met with a mediator, again, trying our very best to reach an agreement with the fire union on terms that would be acceptable to both parties. As is required by mediation and mediators, the terms of those discussions and anything that we offered is confidential. We cannot disclose it, and we've agreed not to disclose it to the public. But I will say that we met in good faith, and we attempted very valiantly to try to reach an agreement in October, and we were unable to do that. In January of 2020, after several months of discussion, we decided to, at your board's direction, revise our last best and final offer. As noted, the original last best and final offer made changes to longevity pay. It also made changes to how travel time is compensated for our employees. And so our amended last best and final offer in January of 2020 removed those items, solely focused on the recommendations of our independent auditor, controller, county clerk, and our independent commission study from CPSM. We presented that amended last best and final offer to the fire union in January. They resubmitted it to their membership for a vote, and it was again rejected by their membership, keeping the parties at impasse. After conclusion of mediation and fact-finding procedures, the county does have the right to implement its last best and final offer, and in this case, the amended last best and final offer that was tendered in January of 2020. The proposed resolution before you would implement that last best and final offer effective July 18th, 2020. As noted, the fire fund is still carrying a deficit of $9 million and needs to achieve significant ongoing savings to balance. And as Mr. Alsop said, it is not just being balanced on changes to our employees. We are adding additional revenue, and we're seeking additional revenue to try to make this department sustainable for a long, long period of time, protecting our employees by adding new equipment purchases that are severely outdated and need to be corrected to provide that safe working environment to our employees. The projected savings of implementing the last best and final offer is $3.4 million to the fire fund. And it's part of our 5-year plan to, again, match the revenues of the fire department with the growing labor costs of its workforce, and to relieve the general fund of having to contribute additional reserve account money to balance the fire fund budget. To date, we have given $24 million of general fund reserves to help balance the budget. Your board and our CAO has recommended and approved those changes and has supported the fire department in this tough time for the last several years. But as Mr. Alsop notes, we're not in the same position as we were 2 years ago. We're not in the same position we were 6 months ago. COVID-19 has changed everything, and it has changed it dramatically. We're expecting a $56.5 million shortfall in our budget, as it will be presented in a few items. We're projecting oil declines in fiscal year 21-22. We've frozen hiring and promotions across the county with very, very few exceptions. We're soliciting voluntary furloughs of our workforce. We're reducing staff in significant numbers, and we're attempting to seek early retirement through some incentive programs that will save the county some additional money. So that's where we are right now. This item is not brought to you during the context when we started the negotiations. In fact, the situation has gotten much, much more bleak, and that is very unfortunate for all of us who are involved in this issue. And back where we're going is the final thing I'll touch on, and that's back in May of this year, we presented to you the projected shortfall to the county's budget, and some items that Mr. Alsop has mentioned. You know, we presented to you some other things that we needed to accomplish potentially and seek from our employees to help stem the tide of these budget declines, and we're not moving forward with those yet, but they still are on the table, and in fact a lot of things are on the table that previously weren't, and those are mandating furloughs, freezing steps, looking at salary reductions across the board, and pursuing the remaining FLSA changes similar to what we're presenting you today with the remaining bargaining units that haven't made those changes. So the item before you is a request for you to consider implementing the county's last, best, and final offer, and I'll walk through that very closely here so that there's no lack of clarity amongst the members of the public and your board about what we're asking to implement. So the first item is a change to the 18-day work period. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, for both fire suppression and law enforcement, the law allows us to select a work period to determine whether or not somebody's eligible for overtime, which is 1.5 times the regular rate of pay. Our current fire union has a 28-day work period under the FLSA. Their work cycle that they work is 2 on, 2 off, 2 on, 2 off, 2 on, and then 8 off, which is 18 days. We are proposing to match that 18-day work shift cycle with the FLSA work period. That will mean that every employee has the same overtime rate for all of their time and a half overtime across the board. Right now, under the 28-day work cycle, as our Auditor, Controller, County Clerk Mary Bedard noted, there is a variation in how employees earn overtime and the rate of overtime because of the 28-day work cycle being out of line with the 18-day work shift cycle. And so employees who work short or reduced amount of shifts during that 28-day period have a higher overtime rate than somebody who's working more shifts during that same 28-day period. That causes a significant increase to the amount of overtime that's paid to our employees, because the shorter your work cycle, or the shorter number of shifts, the less number of shifts you have during that work cycle, the more opportunities for overtime you have, and the higher rate of overtime pay you do get. This proposal to move to an 18-day work period consistent with our 18-day shift cycle evens that all out. It makes sure that all of our employees are paid the same overtime rate that they're entitled to under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And they earn overtime for any hours over 136 hours that they work during that period of time. Their schedule actually scheduled them for 144 hours during that 18-day work period. So they automatically already get the first 8 hours of their work schedule paid at overtime rates. The remaining are paid at straight time, and then any additional over that 136 will be paid at time and a half. And those are the hours that they actually are on duty working. So that's how the work period works under the FLSA. We have a similar work period with our detentions personnel, but it's a 14-day work period. They have a 14-day work cycle, similar to the fire units, how they have an 18-day work cycle. So they already have alignment between their FLSA work period and their work cycle and shift cycle. And so we're seeking the same thing with the fire union here. The second item is to change the way we define hours worked under the FLSA and overtime. So FLSA does not require employers to pay overtime rates for vacation, sick leave, and other paid time off amounts where they're not actually engaged in productive work for the employer. So we've, as the Auditor Controller back in January of 2017, recommended to your board, and as we've pursued with our bargaining group so far, SEIU, Kern County Prosecutors Association, and our confidential bargaining unit, we've changed that and so that they're no longer receiving time and a half for those paid time off hours. Any time that they actually work over a 40-hour week, yes, they're getting time and a half. And in this case, any time that a firefighter or engineer or captain works over the 136 hours actually on duty would get that overtime rate of time and a half. What they wouldn't get is time and a half for vacation hours that they take or sick leave that they take. They still get paid for that time because we've agreed to pay them and give them paid time off, but they would get their straight time for any vacation hours, sick leave hours, or holiday hours that they take off. And so we're seeking to come in alignment with the FLSA. As Mr. Alsop said, we believe that we're at a point financially that we cannot sustain the other way of doing business in the past of paying time and a half off for those paid time off hours. And so we're seeking to come into alignment. The third and final change to that's put before you today is to remove the administrative assignment designation in the salary schedule. Currently, our firefighters who the chief has assigned to an administrative assignment, which we typically refer to as 40-hour employees, their base salary is increased by 5%. So if a captain is making $100,000, a captain in an administrative assignment is making $105,000. What that does is increases the overtime rate. So when that administrative captain who's working 40 hours in the administrative assignment goes to a station to backfill overtime, they're making overtime at a higher rate of pay than somebody who's ordinarily in a 56-hour assignment. Changing this into a special pay, that extra 5% instead of including it, wrapping it into base pay, means that the overtime rate is more consistent across the board for all employees in the same classification and same situation, regardless of their assignment. They do get an extra little bump into their regular rate with that special pay, but it brings it closer down into alignment. And this item in particular was something that the union members back in 2017 brought to us as an item to consider to help control the cost of the fire department. And so we've continued to include it in our proposals because we felt like we were pretty close to an agreement on that particular item. What the last, best, and final does not include is, as I said, the 2% longevity pay going away. So that would still stay in. Our 30-year employees would still get that 2% longevity pay as part of their employment. And the travel time, which right now employees who are, let's say their house is on the coast and they're called into an emergency in Kern County, they get paid the amount of time it takes them to travel from the minute they leave their house to Kern County. Previously, we're seeking to take that away. We're not in this particular case in the last, best, and final before you today seeking to take that away. That would still change or still stay the same as it currently is. And so the item before you is requesting a resolution to adopt these new terms and conditions of employment. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we wish to bring an agreement to you that was longer standing and term, but we feel, based on all the comments that Mr. Alsop and myself have had, that this is something that's necessary to achieve a sustainable future for the fire department, our fire employees, and our county's ability to provide fire services. And to help the chief achieve his goals in having the best fire department possible. So therefore, it is recommended that your board conduct a public hearing, and that means opening a public hearing and receiving public comment. And then our recommendation is that your board adopt this resolution, changing terms and conditions of employment for employees in bargaining units 7 and F, and refer to myself and the Auditor, Controller, County Clerk to implement those changes effective July 18th, 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we want anything else, Mr. CAO, before we go to our public comment? Okay, thank you very much. We do have rather lengthy public input, so we're going to move through this as expeditiously as we can. Okay, so we're going to move to the open hearing the public portion of this agenda item. We have 2 callers, 3 voicemails, and a number of individuals waiting on the line to provide input. Is that correct?
2 individuals that have called in that are waiting on the line to provide
Only
telephonic
2.
comment. Just 2.
And then 3 voicemails.
That is correct.
Excellent. Okay, can we begin with our callers? I see that we have Mr. Michael Turnipseed and Ms. Martha Gibson.
Yes, Mr. Turnipseed, if you would unmute your mic by pressing *6, you can address the board.
Madam Chair, members,
Speak up, Mike, if you don't mind.
okay, how's that?
Much better, thank you. Good morning.
I'm getting feedback, but that's okay.
Oh, you're good now.
Okay. Madam Chair, current tax reports item number 25 on today's agenda, which implements the last, best, and final offer and changes hours, terms, and conditions of employment for the employees of the Kern County Fire Department, effective July 18th, and to achieve a $3.4 million annual savings to the fire fund. The elimination of overtime paid out over and above the required Fair Labor Standards Act is no longer financially viable for our county. This excess payment and overtime was pointed out twice by the county's auditor controller and a $150,000 independent financial operation audit of services done by the Center for Public Safety Management. In fact, the management of public safety included in their list recommendations for immediate action, which didn't take place. Despite these findings in 2 different audits conducted by 2 independent and different organizations, both of which were done 2 years ago, the board has not acted. Given the significant financial challenges faced by the county that now includes extraordinary projected losses of revenue due to coronavirus and the diminishing value of oil properties throughout the county, respectfully, we must say the time to act is now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. We also have Ms. Martha Gibson. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning. Can I be heard?
You can. You want to state your name for the record, and the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much. My name is Martha Gibson, and I want to address the board. Thank you so much for having me for the Board of Supervisors, and also I have intently listened to the conversations that has been stated, and I look at this as a double-edged sword. I am a retired counselor from the school district. My whole family is public servants, and I work with Ms. Sullivan to put in God we trust, and I hold it foremost. And again, we look at a double-edged sword, and also we want transparency, and we really believe that we need to remove any appearance of political corruption. We want to put integrity, and we want to put the citizens first. And I work very closely with electing public servants and to balance the budget in Sacramento, which we don't have. And also, I want to request for the board to consider the safety and the wildfires that are coming, not only this year, but the years to come. And I have to say to you, again, do we want to look at the equipment, which is needed, or do we want to look at the increase or injuries when we have extreme overtime? And do we want to look at the training that has to happen with demoralizing the Kern County fighters and all of the staff members? Again, we have to look in that. Indeed, we want to look at everything involved here. And I have to say to you, I'm very concerned. And why now, when we don't have representation, when things are close? Why now? The appearance doesn't look to me as being really an integritous agenda. And I have to say, many moons ago, I'm very aware of what's happening now. Many moons ago, when the negotiations were happening, there was the delusion, the watering down of the medical insurance for the fire department so that there wouldn't be layoffs. Again, fast forward, we're looking at the hard work that these fires put in, and also the amount of wildfires that has been prevented in the last 2 years. So I really want you to really reconsider and really look at, in God we trust, and look at your heart, look at the double-edged sword that's here with the protecting the citizens, the firefighters, and also the budget. I understand the budget. Again, I work hand in hand with the people of electing a balanced budget. So I really want you to look at this full-heartedly and really give a chance to where we are somewhat back to where we have public opinion that can be represented in front of you. I want to remove the appearance of public corruption because it appears that way to me. And I want to thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much for your call and your input, Ms. Gibson. Appreciate your time. I believe that handles both of our callers. We also have an email from a Donald White. Kathy?
We've received many, many emails, but before we go to the email comments, we're going to hear from 3 callers who left voice messages. We have Linda Jimenez, Lisa Price, and Cindy Chapman. So we'll play those recordings now.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Linda Jimenez. J is in Jack. I-M-E-N-E-Z. And calling regarding the item that will take funding from the fire department. And I am totally against that. And we reject that idea. And we support our firefighters. And the funding is needed for them and not for anything else. And to redirect this money is an outrage. Please reconsider. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lisa Price, and I'm a resident of Kern County. I am calling with regard to Agenda Item 25 for the AM session. I urge the Board of Supervisors to vote no on cutting the Kern County firefighters' pay. The Kern County firefighters are already among the lowest paid firefighters in the state. If you will note, an impartial fact finder has concluded that these firefighters need an increase in pay, not a pay cut. These fine firefighters are constantly asked to do more with less through budget cuts. I again implore and urge you to vote no. Thank you for your time.
Yes, this is in regards to item number 25, AM. My name is Cindy Chapman, and I'm calling in regards to the decreased funding for the fire department, and I don't think it's a very good idea. I think our fire department are very valuable. I think that we could possibly get the funds from other agencies, possibly maybe welfare. Anyway, I just think that it's not a good idea to defund the fire department at this time, especially during fire season. Even, and I think of the people in Hart Flat also. They're without fire service as close as it was. So I just think that we need to stop defunding of the fire department. Thank you.
Yes.
Kathy, thank you so much for the administration of those voicemails. So we have taken 2 callers, 3 voicemails. You have a number of emails we need to deal with.
Madam Chair, members of the board, your board has received approximately 80 emails.
Okay.
You have received them electronically via email. You have received them hard copy. They are in front of you. You have had time to look through them. We do have a letter from Mr. Lieberman, who is legal counsel for the firefighters union.
Okay.
County council has requested that I read that letter in its entirety. And it is up to your chair with respect to the rest of the emails that are read. I will let you know that all 80 emails are in support of not going into impasse, not approving the last best and final offer. We've also received an email from Kern Citizens for Sustainable Government, which is in support of staff's recommendation.
Okay, and we have those, and we have been able to read them, and I have every faith my colleagues have done their due diligence. So thank you. I would like to hear from the council, please.
Okay. This letter is from Howard Lieberman, General Counsel for the Kern County Firefighters Union. Dear Supervisors, I'm writing you as General Counsel for the Kern County Firefighters Union in response to Human Resource Director Devin Brown's board letter to be considered at the June 30, 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting, AM Agenda Item 25, as public comment is woefully limited. In his letter, Mr. Brown recommends that you reduce the take-home compensation of our brave KCFFU members and their families by an estimated $3.4 million during a time when firefighters are working harder than ever responding to emergency calls to keep Kern County safe during our worldwide pandemic. In September 2019, impartial fact finder David Weinberg issued a written recommendation that KCFFU members receive an 11% compensation increase, 3% cost of living adjustments, plus a 5% EMT certification pay, as firefighters in Kern had not received a compensation increase, not offset by a benefit reduction, in over a decade. The recommendation factored in some overtime reform requested by the county, but would have netted the firefighters a fair but not gaudy increase, leaving Kern firefighters still considerably behind peers at comparable agencies. The county chose not to implement the recommendation and also chose not implement its last best final offer. In January 2020, the county revised its last best and final offer by removing some items and continuing to seek changes to contract overtime provisions, which the county proposed would save $3.4 million in the fire fund, taking these dollars from fire families while doing nothing to offset an already low base pay amount. The cost of living has gone up annually since 2008, when KCFFU members received their last raise, not offset by takeaway of other benefits. So the only way they can try to tread water and maintain a 2008 standard of living is to work more and more each year. KCFFU voted down this ingenuous offer, and the county could have timely imposed it in the fiscal year in which the impasse and fact-finding occurred. Instead, 6 months and an entire new fiscal year later, the Chief Human Resources Officer asks you to resurrect this dead issue and potentially commit an unfair labor practice while KCFFU members risk life, limb, and now deadly viruses for the citizens of Kern County, coupled with recent unrest. With limited ability for public comment due to social distancing mandates, we are unable to fill your chambers for this meeting. Unfortunately, the Human Resources Director will not be able to look our members and their family members in their eyes while asking you to reduce our take-home compensation and standard of living by approximately 8.5%. KCFFU members are essential safety professionals who continue to come to work and save lives on a daily basis while other county employees shelter in place in their homes or telecommute. Please consider the very real impact of this vote and do not reduce the compensation of our most essential workers who are more essential than ever during these difficult times. Thank you for your attention to this letter and for including it part of the public record on this matter.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that I'm going to conclude our public hearing portion and return to the board for comment, question, and action. I see Supervisor Gleason has chimed in. I know our fire chief is here. Where are you, Chief? In the back, ready to come down and communicate with this board his ideas and preferences. Supervisor Mick Gleason, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it, Chief. taking a lot of notes here, Chief, so let me bang it around, and I hope you can stay with my scrambled train of thought, but I'll do my best to keep it on target. Could you please talk to me real quick about Rio Bravo Hotshot Crew?
Rio Bravo Hotshot Crew. It costs about $570,000 to have the Rio Bravo Hotshot Crew. With that, the decision was made this year by me to cut the Rio Bravo Hotshot Crew. There's a lot of things going on, and it just made sense that given the number of crews in the Kern Valley area, given the situation I have filling overhead positions within the hand crews, in addition to that, just an overall cost savings. I need to, it's important to comply with minimum wage laws. My other hand crews were bumping up against minimum wage laws, and I needed to raise their salaries to comply with the state of California. And so I felt that it was in the best interest of everyone involved to cut the Rio Bravo Hotshot Crew this year.
Thanks, Chief. I probably should offer you the opportunity. I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. You'll probably get your talking points out before that, but I mean, is there something you'd like to talk about before we go? Or
Yes, definitely. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We've got fire season going. I'm 61 positions short. 40 of those are safety section at the fire stations because it costs less to pay overtime than it does to staff the fire stations with physical people. We are helping the county by working overtime. We're helping the county save $1.8 million by 49 positions unfunded. The two concerns I have, I'd be remiss if I don't talk about them, and that was the hours worked piece and the 40-hour pay. With hours worked, it's less likely that some of our firefighters will return that are on vacation to come back to emergencies. It's less likely that they're going to continue doing specialty positions where they're not getting paid to do those specialty positions, but doing it in general to save the county money and to help our citizens so very much. More people will be forced back to work. Right now, I am forcing people back to work left and right. Left and right. Mandatories every day. Low morale. People are forced back to work because it's important that we do our part. It's important that we do our part to save money, and that's important to me. It's important to me for the community and for the overall operation. I'm also concerned about vacation. My employees not wanting to take vacation, right? Because when they're physically tired and mentally tired, we take vacation. Oftentimes I'm asking them, making them work multiple days in a row, 10 days, 15 days, 20 days. I've worked 30 days in a row. With that, oftentimes they need sleep because they're up all night. It's vegetation fire season. They're up on Lebec in the middle of the night. They get 2 hours sleep. They may want to take a vacation day. With that, depending on how it falls, they could be working for straight time instead of time and a half, and so they may opt to not take vacation. Well, I can't catch everything. I can't catch when a person's all the time, when they're physically unable to perform, and so stuff happens. And so I'm concerned when they're physically tired that they're going to be driving a fire engine in the middle of the night and drive off the side of the road with my men. In addition to that, I'm concerned about the mental health. Oftentimes the firefighters go to freeway accidents. People are decapitated, legs are mangled, everything's all over the freeway. They need a break. They need to take a day off. And so with that, I'm worried that they might not when they need to, and the services will be less. The turnover rate will increase. I know, and Devin has articulated the Sheriff's Department is worse. It is, without a doubt. I'm not arguing that. But I will say we've had 59 people leave since 2015. That's a lot for a fire department. 12 since 2020, the record pace for people leaving. Oftentimes people say, well, David, why don't you recruit more in Bakersfield? I want to recruit more in Bakersfield. That's a priority. I'm going to be doing that. I want to have that component. But that isn't everything. I want the most valuable people for our community. And with that, they must be smart, they must be physically fit, and they must pass a background test to make sure that we have quality individuals going in and out of houses because we're trusted. We're a trusted group, and that's important. And so in order to get that, we need to focus on getting those people that you have to pay a certain amount. Okay. Recruiting could be hampered if we impose a best and final offer. Without a doubt, firefighters talk to each other. They talk amongst the communities, amongst fire departments. I do. I talk to various fire chiefs throughout the state of California. And with that, an imposition on your fire department will have implications because people will think twice about the employee-employer relationships that are taking place. And another thing to note, the 40-hour work week piece, they are administrative positions and they are operations positions, the hand crews. Hand crews are, talk about two things, hand crews and fire prevention. I've worked with the board on a number of issues concerning fire prevention. Very important that our people going in and out of businesses are safe. But you have to know, you get your experience through time. We want people to stay in fire prevention. I want people to stay there to know the rules, state rules, federal rules, county rules, so that when they're working with your businesses, we're following the rules, that we're keeping people safe. If people rotate out, there's going to be a new level of service. And not a lot of people go into fire prevention. When we become firemen, we want to go fight fires and save people and do great things. Not that they're not. They're doing great things. But I'm concerned about the rollover within fire prevention. That will happen. In addition to that, the hand crews. Mountain communities rely on the hand crews. I've cut 3 to 2, down to 2 hand crews. With that, the situation is if I don't get applications for overhead for these 40-hour positions, I won't be able to fund hand crews. It's a very dangerous occupation. We've had whole hand crews burn up on fires. I have to have quality leadership on these hand crews, otherwise I won't have the hand crews. So you can see there's implications with a 40-hour work week with hand crews that affect not only the mountain communities. Hand crews help you with floods in Lamont, floods in McFarland, floods all over. Hand crews even helped in earthquakes in Ridgecrest, because what you get 20 people, young, energetic people to help when you need people power, and that's what you have with the hand crews. People are my most valuable resource, and without a doubt, the people of not only the fire department, but of Kern County are my #1 priority, and I'm available to answer questions.
I have a bunch more for you, so thanks. But to wrap up Rio Bravo, you have coverage in the Kern River Valley despite disbanding that crew, is that correct?
Yes, I do. We do have coverage. We have fire stations up there. We have 3 fire stations that are fully staffed, ready to go. In addition to that, I have a fuels crew or an initial attack crew up at Alta Sierra that can drop down off the hill, a small number of people. When I disbanded Rio Bravo, we also reallocated some of those positions. It wasn't a complete cut. There were positions that have gone out to other areas. The Rio Bravo, the helicopter, we can quickly fly people in. As of right now, if we have the helicopter, we can quickly fly into the Kern River Valley and assist, but then also the federal government has hand crews that are available. But this is, I look at it as a temporary thing, and that when finances get better, I most assuredly want the Rio Bravo hotshots back in the Kern River Valley.
Thanks, Chief, appreciate it. Talk a minute about Orange County.
Okay, so with this, the reason why I know I have concerns about firefighters coming back when they're on vacation at Lake Shasta or wherever they're going to go for vacation. I have concerns because Orange County Fire Authority tried to enact hours worked. 2 years later, they rescinded it, and they did something different because they had problems staffing fire stations with people who were gone on vacation, bringing them back. They also had various other issues. But most assuredly, it didn't work in Orange County.
Thanks, Chief, appreciate it. Give me your overall impression of what we're doing today.
Overall impression of what's taking place, I see, I most desperately want to work on an agreement that all sides can agree on. I understand this is unprecedented times with pandemic financially. I understand that I do have equipment that's outdated and about $60 million behind in fire equipment. I understand that. I understand the need because we've punted the football for years. with dealing with fire equipment was always the thing that got cut. You know, let's cut the equipment because we weren't adequately funded. Because when we did the tax transfer, $18 million was not enough. We were not adequately funded. And so what I see happening, I see concerns with people, the well-being of a fire department, and being able to function at the service levels that we currently have, whether it's the pandemic, whether the budget that we're going to vote on, whether it's the imposition. It's a funding issue. But it's important to me that my firefighters are safe, that we continue forward. You know, I'm concerned for other safety units too, with if they were imposed on this particular hours worked piece that currently aren't. And so the whole thing does concern me. I understand the hard position that the CAO's in. I get that. I get it's a hard position. I believe that we don't have sufficient revenue. But at the same time, there are going to be problems.
Thanks, Chief. A couple more questions and we're done. I don't agree with your comment that you appreciate what the position of the CAO, because I don't look at it as a position of the CAO. I look at it as a position of the taxpayer. The taxpayer is sitting here. It's not the CAO. This taxpayer is demanding that we balance the budget, we responsibly manage their dollars, and we provide fire service to them in a competent and effective manner. And that person needs to be, is my concern, not the CAO, not you so much as that taxpayer. My priority is when I think of it is not how the CAO thinks about things, it's how I see, how the taxpayer sees things. Service level impacts. I heard you say that you believe there are going to be indirect service level impacts, but I didn't hear you say anything about direct service level impacts. Is that a correct statement?
Well, there will be direct service impacts, both, you know, operationally. There will be situations where when we have emergencies, I may not get back as many people and we'll have to temporarily close the fire station. There will be impacts on the hand crews if 40-hour piece happens. I don't know if I'm going to get applications. I don't know. I have a bad feeling that I'm not going to get the applications that are needed, and so that highly concerns me. There will be direct impacts on the fire department, and I will need to have certain stations closed at times.
Thank you, Chief. My last question. I had a very wonderful conversation with Fireman Nelson yesterday. And in our conversation, we had a lot of things we agreed on, some things we disagreed on. But one of the things he talked about was you have a pregnant fire person. And he was concerned about her. I don't mean to put you on the spot if you're not prepared to answer this question. You may not be, because it's not really directly related to this. But do we have problems with maintaining her safety and how her work conditions?
And so with this piece, I know in negotiations, Devin has worked with this, and it went up the chain of command. It went over into human resources, and there's been a series of decisions, and I'm going to defer to Devin at this time on to answer that question. In particular, breastfeeding newborns, and I do have concerns in that area. I want to take care of everybody. I want to really look at that, right, and see whatever I can do to assist.
I don't need an answer to it right now. All I need to know is that you got your eyeballs on it, and could you report back to me and make sure that we're moving in the right direction and that woman and that baby are properly cared for?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Chief, that's all I got for you. Thanks. You can grab a seat. Yeah, I'm sure these guys are going to have more questions for you. I got a couple other comments, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. As I said earlier, I had a great conversation yesterday with the union president, and I thought it was productive. I thought it was meaningful. I hope he feels the same way. I think he made some good points that I didn't fully appreciate, and I think I made some good points that he may have learned from. We talked about trust, we talked about equity, and we also talked about audit. And my point is this: have we seen the audit that they developed independently, Mr. CAO? Have we seen this piece? Okay. We should look at it. I think I don't know where they got the numbers. I don't know anything about it, but it is different from ours. And I don't know how valid it is, but I think we should at least look at it and give consideration, point to them where it's right and where it's wrong. I read the first page, and a couple things jumped right off at me, and it's glaringly different from ours, and I don't know where they got the information. But I think they're basing their opinions on that. I don't know. I want to apologize to CAO for some comments you've been hearing, and it's unfair, totally unfair. Targeting you, I thought, was not in a successful strategy for them. It's not going to move me in the least bit, and I don't think it's going to move this board, and I think it's unfair and unnecessary, and I hope the union, if they are responsible for it, which I hope they're not, but if they are, I hope they change their ways. All these things that were listed in as the FLSA were elements of the assessment that we were given a couple years ago. Is that correct?
Supervisor Gleason, through the chair, yes.
Thank you very much. This is one element of a holistic strategy for us to develop a sustainable fire department. That's the way I look at this. This is one element. I think Mr. Alsop did a real good job of outlining the fact that we're not just talking about cutting, we're talking about augmenting, and we're talking about sustainment and where we're going to be in 10 years from now, because we know one thing, where we are today is not sustainable. So I appreciate the fact that we are looking for ways to create a more effective fire department, and I'm all in on all those conversations. I want everybody to know that my office laid off 2 employees recently in the past couple weeks. This is not something that we are looking to lay off anybody, but my office, under the circumstances we were in, we had to do that in order to comply with the mandates issued to us by the upcoming budget. And we did that, and we're looking for further ways to continue to help maintain and create a budget that's sustainable. This is my final thought. I think that if I look across the broad spectrum of Kern County, I need to be able to look at every employee we have. I need to look at them in the eye, and I need to be saying that I'm treating you as fairly as I possibly can. And right now, I can't do that with the fire department where they are. I can't do that with the fire department where they have a situation where firefighters can manipulate schedules in order to optimize or maximize their overtime rules that we allow them, so that we have a firefighter that makes an exorbitant amount of money, and we have a SEIU employee or another employee from the probation department that doesn't have the same opportunities. It's just not fair, and I think once we make this adjustment, we can start talking in a more balanced way about how we move forward into the future. So I'd like to conclude my comments. I'd like to thank the chief. I know you're in an incredibly difficult spot. I'd like to thank the CAO. I know you're in an incredibly difficult spot, and I'd like to make a motion to support staff's recommendation.
Supervisor Gleason, thank you for your thoughts and your motion. I do not see anyone else plugged in and ready to speak. Oh, Supervisor Maggard, there you are. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, could you come back up for just a moment, please? Did you communicate, we're implementing something with the union. It impacts all the members of our fire department, but this is a bargaining unit. This is a union negotiation process. Did you approach the firefighters union to seek alternatives to this conclusion?
Yes, outside of negotiations, we have a lot of conversations. Inside negotiations, there was a lot of different things discussed. Outside of negotiations, we look at a lot of options of things that could happen and things we could do.
Yeah, I'm not trying to intimate at all that you inappropriately negotiated. I don't mean that. You lead a group of men and women in a very difficult job, and you need to communicate with them. So did you communicate with them about alternatives? Did you offer alternatives, and did they agree to attempt any of your alternatives that you gave them to this rather than this conclusion?
So we talked about the possibility, it was my idea, to look at closing certain stations. And with that, I think the 18-day work cycle, would be something that we should strongly look at, the 18-day work cycle, no manipulation of overtime, and I'm 100% on board with that. I think there's a strong need, given the unhealthiness and the inadequate funding of the fire department, to do brownouts, and I think that we need to do those now, and I've talked to the union about those particular items of brownouts and station closures and an 18-day work cycle.
I don't want the public to misunderstand what a brownout is. One option, I suppose, is to permanently close stations. Another option is to periodically, for a day or a shift, close a particular station when there is another station nearby enough that that station can cover with a modest decrease in response time, or increase in response time, rather. Explain to the public, and for our public's benefit to us, what a brownout is and how that strategy might have been employed.
Okay, so we will strategically look geographically across the landscape, across Kern County. We will look at a variety of fire stations, depending on the time of year. Is it fire season? Is it winter time? Strategically pick stations to temporarily close, brown them out. The lights aren't on, they're closed. For that day, we would rotate it. We would do rolling brownouts. So, for example, if we wanted to do 3 stations, we may look at one station on the west side, one station to the north, one station to the south, and rotate that in areas that we think, given that time of year, we can do so. Now, there could be implications. There can be implications. I'm not saying it's 100% safe. Whenever you take away firefighters, it's not a good thing. I don't believe. And so with that, though, we would roll them around and do the best we could to do everything we can to save money and provide our service.
So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So did you offer an attempt to solicit from the union, the firefighters union? Did you offer and did you solicit alternatives from them to this conclusion, that there might be other ways to get there rather than doing this?
I did talk to them about brownouts and the 18-day work cycle, yes, sir, and they weren't in agreement to that situation.
They were not in agreement. Correct. Very good. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Alsop, could you please give us a little bit more background about the relative turnover in the fire department as opposed to other departments?
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard, for the question through the chair, the rest of the board. Yes. Turnover by resignation. This does not include retirements, but people that are resigning to principally, I would imagine, take a job elsewhere in the county. The county turnover rate on average is approximately 8.8% across all departments for the last year and a half. So for the last year and a half, this tracks turnover rate, 8.8% across all departments. Fire's turnover rate is 4%. This, based on what we've looked at, is comparable to the turnover rate in other fire departments throughout the state. To give you an idea of some of the issues and challenges that we have in engaging our employees and compensating them, et cetera. SEIU, Deputy Public Defenders, at 25% turnover rate. The Kern County this is the deputy DAs, I'm sorry, I was blanking there. Deputy DAs, 18% turnover rate with our deputy DAs. Our detention officers is at 9% for the past year and a half. It was up near 20 prior to your board taking some action to provide some additional compensation, an F-step there, which has helped. I think there's more work to do. SEIU Human Services Technicians, 9% turnover. SEIU social workers, very difficult job, 8.5% turnover. The probation officers, 8% turnover in our probation department. Firefighters are 4%. And I'm actually happy to report that over the last year and a half that the KLEA, this is the Sheriff's Department, is at 3.25% in the last year and a half in their turnover rate. Primarily, you know, Devin noted that they were up near 20% related to your actions over the past year to address some retention and recruitment, which was out of control, frankly, at the Sheriff's Department, at least for the time being. We're seeing some results. We have much more work to do in that area with the Sheriff's Department. So 4% overall. I hope that answers your question, Supervisor.
It does, sir. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, that's all of my comments.
Supervisor Maggard, thank you for those questions. Do I have any other colleagues who would like to provide input, ask questions of our chief or our CAO or of each other? Not all at once, please. Okay, as chair of the board, I'm going to call on my colleagues again. Do you have comments or input that you would like to provide to the public, to each other, or to staff?
I'll second the motion.
Supervisor Maggard, thank you for your motion. We have a motion and a second. I do not see anybody else. Oh, Supervisor Scrivener.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wrong button. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to ask a question of staff. To be quite frank with everyone, the conversations I've had with the chief and his comments today caused me to have quite a bit of concern with some of the operational problems that may occur with him in the staffing of his hand crews and his fire prevention, bringing folks back to fill needed shifts from vacation, et cetera, with the hours worked. The 18-day work cycle, that seems to be Chief, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a change in our staffing, or in our works, rather in our shift cycle, that would make sense to do. I don't want to put words in your mouth. If you want to answer that.
Yes, sir. The 18-day work cycle switch from a 28-day work cycle, I believe that it would actually be a higher cost savings than anticipated, because depending on how you work a 28-day work cycle, you can make more during some periods and less during others during your cycle. With that 18-day work cycle, it equilibrates it into a steady system. And with that, I think that's a fair adjustment and a big savings. And I think the overall savings of hours worked and the 40-hour piece is less. Now, I am not an accountant. I know a lot of people have looked at this. However, what I do know are people. And with that, the way they can adjust the system, I believe it was done with a snapshot in time. In the summertime, our busiest time of year, where they're looking at, there's tons of overtime based on fires going on, based on a lot of variables. In addition to that, I believe that people won't take vacation during certain times, and there won't be the cost savings of $3.4 million, just based on that I've been a firefighter for 26 years, and I know how it's going to work. And so I would say, though, that the 18-day work cycle, I want to make sure that it's a fair and system for everybody.
And it makes it consistent with the shift cycle, as Mr. Brown had pointed out. So you're looking at two 18-day periods. I want to ask a question of council or Mr. Brown. I know that we have a last, best, and final that is before us that lists several different changes to the working conditions. There's 4 that I have in the staff report, but did I hear you, Mr. Brown, say that the 30-year longevity is no longer part of the proposal, or is it still? I think that's item 4.
Supervisor Scrivener, through the chair, the item that you're referring to was included in our original last, best, and final offer, but it is not included in the one before you today. On the document that you're looking at, it's identified because that's talking about the original last, best, and final offer.
So if that's been removed, would we be able to, for me personally, this 18-day work cycle is an item that I think has merit, will save costs, but doesn't give me the same pauses as the hours worked and the way in which it might impact this chief's ability to staff his stations and equipment. And so can we vote separately on these items?
Supervisor Scrivener, through the chair, I'll answer that and then turn to County Counsel, Ms. Rezan, to respond as well. Under labor laws, you're not able to implement anything except the last, best, and final offer that's on the table at any given time through imposition. You can direct staff to renegotiate, as I mentioned you did in January when we removed 2 items from the original last, best, and final offer. That again has to be presented to the union for their opportunity to reach agreement with us on that amended version. But it's not something that you can do today.
Madam Counsel, do you concur?
Supervisor Scrivener, through the chair, I do concur with that assessment.
So we would have to go back and discuss the 18-day work cycle specifically if that was the only item that a member of the board was inclined to support?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I can call the motion now or wait for additional input from my colleagues. Supervisor Couch just punched in. Supervisor Couch, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Are we able to, I just want to clarify something. Are we able to speak to whether or not we have, and this speaks to your recruitment piece, Mr. Alsop or Mr. Brown, whichever one of you brought this up. Do we have any interest in lateraling to the Kern County Fire Department from other departments? Can we say that without mentioning names or without mentioning a number, or do we have to just leave that issue alone?
Supervisor Couch, through the chair, I can address that question. So recently, the Kern County Fire Department requested our office to conduct a firefighter lateral recruitment. Specifically, we're looking at paramedic licensed firefighters from other organizations to come on board to augment our existing firefighters who have paramedic certification. This is something that we've never done in my tenure, and I don't believe we've done for some period of time, is seeking firefighters to come from other organizations without going through our normal testing process. We do that pretty regularly with our deputy sheriffs and detentions personnel in the Kern County Sheriff's Office, so it's something that we've had experience with before. But with respect to our ability to find candidates, I looked at the list yesterday of available candidates, and surprisingly, we did have a good number of candidates to consider. Obviously, they still have to go through the chief's vetting and the background process before they're able to come on board, but there is significant interest in laddering to the Kern County Fire Department.
And when that happens, it could be, they would be lateraling in, meaning they're coming from one department to the Kern County Fire Department. They come in as a firefighter, not at the rank there. Perhaps they're an engineer, perhaps they're a captain. They've got to come in as a firefighter. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're looking for firefighters. And I know other jurisdictions do something similar where they're seeking to poach other firefighters from other organizations. But yes, they would come over as a firefighter rank.
Well, I just wanted to mention that because I had heard that, and that's good news. I'm glad that at least they at least have some interest in people lateraling over. Hopefully, these are not people that have problems where they are, and they're just trying to get out of a bad situation. Hopefully, they're well qualified. Thank you. Supervisor Scrivener touched on something that is very, and I want to expand on this because I think the public needs to know more about this. Whoever wrote the labor laws and negotiating laws ought to be given some sort of an award for the most complicated, most cumbersome process humanly possible. But it's always been my experience that in the past, at least with other types of situations, that a board could do something less restrictive than what was noticed. But in this case, we can only do what was noticed and we can't do anything piecemeal at this point. That's what you said?
Supervisor Couch, through the chair, that is correct.
We literally could not even say, I believe, we could not even say, by the way, we're going to adopt this last, best, and final and give everybody a 10% raise, because that's not available today.
That is correct. There, I suppose.
Because they might, the reason being, hear me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but hear me. What I thought I heard someone say yesterday is, well, were that presented to them, they might not have agreed to that because they might have wanted, I'm being facetious, 15%, right?
Correct, or they might have agreed to that offer had it been provided to them for consideration.
Or they would have countered or something.
Correct.
Okay. So I want to kick around what Supervisor Scrivener was mentioning just a moment ago. I think he was mentioning. This becomes effective if moved on and passed today, July 18th.
That is what the request by Mr. Brown is in the county, yes.
We have another meeting on July 14th. That's the only other time we meet before that date?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm just posing the question, is it worth one last shot at something? I don't know what that something is. We probably have to discuss it today if possible, and I don't even think it's on our agenda. What's that? I think we have all the I've forgotten if we have all the bargaining units on the closed session agenda.
I believe so.
Okay. Is it worth us discussing that in closed session today before we take an action on this particular item right now? That's the question I'm posing. I thought we were going to have this item in the afternoon and we were going to get to have a discussion in closed session, but for one reason or another we're not. And I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. And I know I'm making your jobs more difficult.
Supervisor Couch, I see Mr. Alsop looks like he wants to chime in. Is that correct? Or did I misread that?
I'm happy to make a comment.
Please do.
Yeah, we have, obviously, this has been discussed at length many times in various settings, but through the chair, Supervisor Couch, I think that, and the county council can correct me, or Mr. Brown can correct me, but what you have before you today is the package, and you either do it or you don't do it. If you don't do it, we have a discussion in closed session. You direct us to do something different. We take that back, and assuming the union wants to meet and they determine a date, and we can set a date to get that done, we sit down and we say, here's what we're asking now, and here's the last, best, and final. Who knows how many meetings that will be to discuss that. And then I presume that they probably take it to a vote, and I'm not sure how that would work out. And we may wind right back up here talking about imposition again at some point, but maybe not. Maybe we can get some resolution. But what you're saying is that you would like potentially to move or continue this item into the afternoon and have a discussion about this in closed session about other labor-related options? Is that what you're asking, Supervisor?
That's what I'm asking because I heard interest from Supervisor Scribner in what I had been thinking about in the recent past, but I don't know how to get there.
Right.
And I don't know the implications of that, and I don't know that I can discuss that in the open session either, or should.
Margot, you want to? You want to stay out of this, Margot?
I see Supervisor Maggard has punched in.
Good.
Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we were to proceed, we have spent months, many months, and a long process bringing us to the point of addressing this question today. If we were to proceed with and implement this imposition of these changes with the firefighters union, is there anything stopping the firefighters union and the county from negotiating after that for a subsequent arrangement that might lead us to an alternative that would be agreeable to both?
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, the answer to that is no, there's no prohibition. And in fact, the agreement is not in place if you impose, and they have the right to reopen negotiations. And so does the county to reopen negotiations to find its way to a successor MOU after, if your board was to adopt the resolution today. So the likely result is that, yes, we will be back at the table with this group in the near future to try to continue to reach that agreement. And if that were to happen, whatever your board implements today would just remain in effect until that successor MOU took place.
So thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I understand that there's appears to be an interest by at least one of us to the possibility of doing a bit more negotiation before we decide yes or no to implement this. So if we do implement this, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. There's nothing stopping the county and the firefighters union from negotiating an enhancement or a different agreement to which both parties can agree.
That is correct.
And that could commence the next day.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Supervisor Maggard, are you done? Thank you. I see CAO punch back in, and then Supervisor Gleason. Did you get covered? Thank you. Supervisor Gleason.
Thank you. Let me simplify this real quick. What we're doing is we're taking a decision on whether we want to reduce firefighter pay, their overtime pay, to FLSA standards. Eric.
That is correct, Supervisor Gleason.
My motion stands.
Supervisor Gleason, we have a motion, we have a second, and council position one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, in addition to response to a question posed by Supervisor Maggard about the union or the county's right to revisit and renegotiate, that's provided within the government code. There's also, just for thinking creatively, the action you take today, if you were to vote to impose, is for the imposition to take effect on July 14th. It's not a very long period of time, but, I'm sorry, 18th. So although it's not a very long period of time, there is nothing that would stop the parties from continuing to talk between today and July 18th, and if terms can be reached, then your board could rescind the imposition.
That's very interesting. I did not know that. Colleagues, have you ever been more miserable? These are tough issues. You want to say something, Dave?
I'll just make a comment, and I don't like doing this, but while it is true what Supervisor Magger just pointed out, that we could begin negotiating immediately, tonight, in fact, this afternoon. I have heard him wax poetically about keeping people under pressure and getting people together when there's leverage on both sides to make them come together. And I just felt like this was, I heard him say that once, and I agreed with him, and I felt like this was a sort of the exact same type of situation that we were in, which is why I brought it up. Thank you.
You know, I think that this board should be as unified as they can on this issue moving forward. Nobody likes the position that we're in at the moment, but I would like to get a sense from my colleagues about where they are on moving forward with this, because like you, I am brokenhearted about this situation. It has been 8 years in closed session. I have waited for a resolution on this challenge, and there does not seem to be one in sight. And I, utterly detest the options that are before us because there is no resolution moving forward. And I just have real concerns that this is ever going to be resolved. And, I think we need to flesh this out a bit. Supervisor Maggard, I see you're punched in. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to specifically address my colleague and friend, Supervisor Couch. I'm not diminishing or challenging your comment. I think it does just what I have said before, that when all parties have their feet at the fire and have something to lose, they then find a way to find agreement. And I think after the extensive discussions and negotiations we've had, the last opportunity, that's what last, best, and final means, the last opportunity now for the union to moderate their position is for us to impose, and before it is implemented, before it goes into effect, if they have an idea, we've asked them for ideas, we've asked them to agree to alternatives to this, they would not. This gives them one last chance to do that. So I kind of think that us taking this step accomplishes that, which I do believe is a good negotiation tool to try to find something that works for all sides. So thank you for the opportunity to say that to my colleague.
Supervisor Maggard, thank you. And I appreciate your willingness to have this discussion, frankly, because it's uncomfortable for everybody. Supervisor Gleason?
Me again. Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Appreciate everybody's concern. I know how hard this is. It's not easy for me, nor is it easy for my team and the people I consult to make this decision, but it is the way it is. And I believe that the fiscal cliff we're heading for is real. I believe we need to be fair to all of our employees, not just the firefighters. I believe that we have a strategy in place, or we're going to after we take the next series of motions, to create a different but a sustainable fire department that's going to satisfy the taxpayers' need and satisfy the public safety requirements that our firefighters are so vitally interested in. I know they don't like it. I know I will be reviled. I'm okay with that. I think that this is in the best interest of Kern County. I believe it is. I believe it's the best interest of our entire public safety profile, and I believe that the holistic approach we're taking to create a sustainment within the fire department is going to be difficult, and this is the first of a series of difficult decisions we're going to have to make for the next several years. And I believe we need to have faith in the fact that it's not about just reducing someone's overtime and having them eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich by, say, ham sandwich or whatever it is. It's about creating a safety program that we can all have a piece of and believe in, and our fire department's going to take a vital role in that. And that's why I'm adamant in in moving forward on this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scrivener.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The chief works for the five of us, yet he stood at the podium and said more passionately than I've heard him ever speak that he believes that certain components of this are going to cause operational challenges for his department. You mentioned that one of these changes was adopted by another fire department, Orange County, and they reversed course in fairly short order because they were seeing issues for it, issues created by the change. I spoke about the 18-day work period and the merit that I view there that the chief concurred with. I don't know that it helps in negotiations when you've already made a decision, and then the other side, is then going to have to respond. And so I don't think, with all due respect, I mean, I know, we all have our opinions up here and are all trying to achieve the same thing. I think that we're going to have some other difficult decisions that we're probably going to have to make when it comes to our labor force for all bargaining units in the county. Furloughs were mentioned, pay cuts were mentioned. Those may be terrible choices that we're going to have to make in the future, and I'm interested in looking at those choices holistically when the time comes versus making a decision now that the expert who runs our fire department feels are going to be detrimental to his ability to operate. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, so am I hearing you correctly, Supervisor Scrivener, then you're not comfortable supporting this motion now?
We'll see when I vote.
Okay. Supervisor Couch, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Still don't know, there's no interest, I get there's no interest on behalf of Mr. Alsop, Mr. Brown, you guys have been through this long enough. If there's no interest from the board on having a discussion in closed session or bringing this back in the afternoon even, that's fine.
Okay.
Thought I'd bring it up.
Okay, I think we have a legitimate problem here. I am not comfortable calling the vote. I would like to take the matter into closed session and come back in the PM. Can I do that, Kathy?
I believe the board could vote to continue the item to the PM session, but it would require a vote of affirmative vote of your board to continue the item.
Supervisor Couch, do you want to make that motion?
We currently have a motion on and second right now. County Council, can we get some guidance?
Well, if we vote it down, then it can't come back in the PM. Supervisor Gleason, are you comfortable holding your motion or withdrawing it at this time so we can have further discussion?
My motion stands.
Well, you're not helping me, Mick.
I love all you guys, I really do.
Can I ask a question?
I get you, Mick, thank you. Supervisor Couch.
This is a question for County Council. If the motion is voted on and it is voted 3 negative to 4, are we able to have that reconsideration of that motion or anything in the afternoon? Can we still, or is it done?
My understanding is once your board votes on an item, it is done. It would have to be it's done.
And what happens when it's, quote, done?
The board would have voted on the action before it, this item.
I understand that. What are the consequences to the negotiation, any of that?
So if you're asking if the board votes now to not follow the recommendation or adopt what staff is asking you to do, then status quo remains with the MO, with the labor, the current status of the labor negotiations.
And so does that mean we go back to square one in negotiations?
Pretty much, yes.
What happens if there's only, what happens if there's an abstention and it's 2 for, 2 against, and 1 abstention? What happens then?
I believe the matter fails, or it would not, you would not have imposed.
And is it still that we go back to square one?
Yes.
So the question is to the maker of the motion, does he potentially want to go back to square one?
Yes, he does. That's what he
Oh,
told me.
I don't believe.
That's okay, I
don't think
respect that.
I don't think he does, but maybe he does.
Well, I think Mick has stated his position very clearly.
Okay.
And I want to say, thank you, Couch, for trying that. That was very, very helpful and thoughtful. I do appreciate that. This is the least favorite position I've ever been on in this board because I have never voted to impose on employees. I have never wanted to do that. I think the morale of our employees is important. I think the way we treat them is important. This is an issue, however, that has been before us for the entirety of my time as a supervisor. There has never been any real resolution. It feels like an impossible and truly miserable scenario where, because of the politics and because of the remarkable challenges associated with leadership, that we have not been able to make any real progress on. I am going to support staff's recommendation, which I know is going to get me in a whole lot of trouble. And I'm going to do that because I feel after 7.5 years, I have done everything within my power and my talent and my passion to try to resolve this issue. And in moving forward with what are likely going to be furloughs, layoffs, and the whole kind of misery that really breaks my heart because I love this county and I love our workforce. I think we need action on this matter, and I'm going to support this motion. And to my chief, who I adore, respect, and admire, I hope and pray that we can make some changes in the next 2 weeks and get to a better place. But I am no longer comfortable proceeding as we have done so in the past. And I recognize the miserable position you're in and many, many of my friends that I care so deeply for within this industry. I'm going to call the vote, and I want my colleagues to understand that I'm going to support staff's recommendation. So there is a motion by Supervisor Mick Gleason, a second by Supervisor Mike Maggard. I would ask you now to please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. 3 ayes, 1 abstention. Supervisor Couch, 1 opposed. Supervisor Scrivener.